Imagine this. You just got $100 for your birthday. What would you do with it? Maybe you'd spend it right away, maybe you'd save it, or maybe you'd try to grow it. But have you ever thought about what actually happens to money over time? Can $100 today be worth less in the future? Can it turn into more? What if you borrow money? How does that work? These are the kinds of questions that can make a huge difference in your future. Money isn't just something that you earn and spend. It changes in value, it can grow, and it can even work against you if you're not careful. Welcome back to Everest Financial Literacy Crash Course. This is episode 2, where we break down the core concepts of personal finance, things that affect you every day, even if you don't realize it yet. If you've ever wondered why prices keep going up, why people say credit cards can be dangerous, or how interest can be your best friend and worst enemy, this is the episode for you. In our first episode, we talked about why financial literacy matters, how understanding money early gives you an advantage later in life. If you haven't watched that yet, go check it out first, then come back. Today we're covering 5 major topics that will help you understand how money really works: inflation, interest, debt, credit, and building a healthy financial mindset. This stuff might sound complicated, but I promise it's way easier than you think. Once you understand the first 4 basics, you'll have that foundation you need to make smart money moves for the rest of your life. But there's one last thing that ties it all together, and that's your mindset about money. At the end of the day, personal finance isn't just about numbers. It's about your mindset. The way you think about money determines how you use it. If you believe that managing money is stressful or confusing, you're more likely to avoid it and make mistakes later. But if you see money as a tool, something that can work for you, something you can control, you'll start making decisions that set you up for success. That's why starting early is important. You don't have to be an expert, and you don't have to be perfect. Every little step you take now adds up, whether it's saving a small percentage of your money, avoiding unnecessary debt, or just being aware of your spending habits. You're already ahead of the game. So are you ready? Let's dive in. Our first topic to talk about today is inflation. It's undeniably one of the most important topics in the world of finance, so you may have already heard about it before. At its core, inflation is simply the gradual increase in prices over time. I actually like to think of this in 2 different phases. First, the prices go up, and second, the purchasing power of money goes down. Let me give an example to clarify. Imagine a meal at your favorite restaurant costs $20. With inflation, prices of goods and services first increase, which means that the restaurant will have to pay more for things like ingredients and their workers' salaries. In order to keep profits, they will have to raise the cost of your meal to, let's say, $25. The result of this is that the purchasing power of your money decreased, since the $20 that you had before is no longer enough to buy a meal. Although it's pretty simple, inflation holds so much power when it comes to understanding how the economy works. It affects wages, savings, investments, and even government policies. Think about the stuff you buy all the time: groceries, gas, even your favorite snacks. When inflation is too high, prices can skyrocket, making everything more expensive. That means people can afford less, businesses struggle, and sometimes even jobs disappear because companies can't keep up with rising costs. But inflation can also go the opposite way. If it's too low or even negative, which is called deflation, people hold off on spending because they think prices will keep dropping. This might sound good at first, but if everyone stops buying things, businesses make less money and the whole economy slows down. To keep things balanced, central banks, like the Federal Reserve, step in. They use interest rates to control inflation, which affects how easy or expensive it is to borrow and spend money. Inflation also explains why we can't just hold on to our money. Like we talked about in our last video, money is a store of value, and a better one than most alternatives. However, it isn't a perfect store of value, and that's because of inflation. As prices go up and the value or purchasing power of our money goes down, we shouldn't just hold on to our cash. This is why adults put money into bank accounts and invest their savings. Understanding inflation helps you see why prices change, how governments make decisions, and why saving and investing wisely is a game changer for your future. Whether you're buying a cup of coffee today or planning for something big later in life, inflation is always working in the background. The second crucial topic for us to learn is interest. Interest is the price paid by a borrower to the lender for borrowing money. Think about it this way. Imagine you lend your money to someone with the risk that they don't successfully pay you back. You would want a bit extra in return for taking that risk. This is exactly what interest does in the world of finance. In your life, it could actually have 2 different meanings, one for when you're the borrower and another for when you're the lender. When you borrow money, interest would be the extra amount that you pay to the lender you're borrowing from. On the other hand, sometimes you'll actually be the lender. The most common example of this is when you put your money into an account at the bank. And in those cases, interest would be the extra amount that you earn. Okay, now that we understand interest at a basic level, let's talk about a few more specifics. One term you need to know before talking about interest is something called the principal. Luckily, it's really simple. The principal is just the original amount of money borrowed. So if you borrow $1,000 through a loan, the principal would literally just be $1,000. Nothing complicated there. With that out of the way, we can get into one of the most important ideas in finance, simple versus compound interest, and why they matter so much. If you recall from the last video, compound interest in particular is a game changer. Because of this, understanding the difference between the two is super important. It can be the difference between growing wealth over time and owing way more than you expected. First off, simple interest is interest that's based on only the principal. What does this mean exactly? Let's break it down with an easy example. Imagine you lend $1,000 to your friend with an interest rate of 5% per year. Since this is simple interest, the interest they owe will always be based on the original amount, the $1,000. So every year you gain $50 in interest, 5% of $1,000. After 1 year, that's $50 in interest. After 2 years, it's $100. After 3 years, it's $150, and so on. The math is straightforward. But now let's talk about compound interest, which works a little differently. With compound interest, the interest applies not just to the principal, but also any interest that's already built up. Let's go back to the same example, $1,000 at a 5% interest rate. After year 1, you earn $50 in interest, just like before. But in year 2, instead of calculating 5% on just $1,000, you now earn 5% on $1,050, your original principal plus the $50 from year 1. That means instead of earning just another $50, you earn $52.50. After year 3, the interest is applied to an even larger amount, and the cycle keeps going. Now, this might not seem like a big deal at first, but over time, compound interest grows exponentially, meaning it can work for you, like in investments, or work against you, like in loans and debt. Let's take a bigger example so you can see just how powerful it can be. Imagine two people, person A and person B. They both start with $10,000 and invest it at a 7% annual interest rate for 40 years. The only difference, person A earns simple interest, meaning their interest is calculated only on the original $10,000, whereas person B earns compound interest, meaning their interest grows on top of previous interest, year after year. At first, their investments might look similar, but let's fast forward and see what happens. After 10 years, person A has $17,000. Not bad. But person B, who's earning compound interest, $19,672. Already, they're ahead. After 20 years, person A has $24,000, but person B, $38,697. Almost double. After 40 years, here's where things get wild. Person A, using simple interest, now has $38,000. Meanwhile, person B, thanks to compound interest, has $149,744, almost 4 times more than person A. So let's pause for a second. Person B didn't invest more money, they didn't work harder, they just let compound interest do its thing. This is also why starting early is important. The more time you give your money to grow, the bigger the difference becomes. Your money starts working for you instead of the other way around. Now, let's get to our third core concept for today, which is debt. This one isn't too complicated, so it won't take long. Debt is simply the amount of money you owe. If you take out a $1,000 loan, you're in $1,000 of debt. Easy, right? But even though debt has a simple definition, its power is massive. It can be a useful tool or a dangerous trap, depending on how you manage it. Debt allows people to afford things they otherwise couldn't, like buying a house, going to college, or starting a business. But if you don't understand how it works, it can spiral out of control, especially with high interest rates, late fees, and bad borrowing habits. This is why learning about that early can help you make smarter financial decisions later on. That brings me to the next idea, which is credit. Credit is your ability to acquire goods or services now and pay for them later, with the trust that you'll actually follow through on that repayment. Sounds simple, but it's a huge deal in the financial world. Think about it. If you've ever borrowed money from a friend and paid them back, you've already used a basic version of credit. But when it comes to banks and businesses, credit is much more structured. It's tracked, scored, and used to determine whether you can get loans, rent an apartment, or even buy a car. This is why having a good credit is so important. A good credit score means you're seen as trustworthy. Banks and businesses are more likely to lend you money at lower interest rates. But if you don't manage credit well, you can end up paying way more than necessary for things like car loans, student loans, or even a mortgage. So what's the key takeaway here? Credit can be incredibly helpful, but only if you manage it wisely. Now that you understand these 4 building blocks, let's tie everything together with one of the most important lessons in personal finance: building a healthy financial mindset. Understanding concepts like inflation, interest, debt, and credit is great, and knowing how they work can help you make smarter financial decisions. But here's the thing: none of that knowledge matters if your mindset about money isn't in the right place. Remember Sam and Jordan from our first episode? They were both earning the same salary. Sam saved consistently, spent intentionally, and invested wisely. Jordan spent impulsively, avoided thinking about his finances, and assumed that he'll figure it out later. Fast forward to retirement, Sam had built financial security and options for the future, while Jordan was struggling with debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and feeling trapped. They both had the same opportunities. The only difference: mindset. How you see money determines how you manage it. If you view money as something that just slips through your hands, you'll likely struggle to save. If you see it as something to fear, you might avoid making important decisions. But if you treat money as a tool, something you can control and use to build opportunities for yourself, you're already ahead of the game. Having a healthy financial mindset means being intentional with your money, thinking long term, seeing money as a tool, not a source of stress, and avoiding comparison. The last one is really important. Just because someone looks wealthy doesn't mean they actually are. Focus on your financial journey. At the end of the day, personal finance isn't just about knowing numbers. It's about building habits and a mindset that can help you make the most of what you have. So before we end today, here's something to think about. Who do you want to be 10 years from now? The person who's in control of their future, or the one stuck wondering where it all went? The choice starts now. That's a wrap for this episode. If this was helpful, be sure to check out our next video where we'll dive into understanding loans, their importance, and risks. But until next time, keep learning and take the first step towards reaching your financial Everest.